to our discussion of this is how entitled should parents feel to like the intimate details of their kids' lives?
People just don't recognize how having that relationship for a child can be really life-changing.
There's whole camps of people that just think it's all a bunch of BS and it's made up, and you're indoctrinated. My daughter, 24 female, is a lesbian. I found out by accident when she was 15, and I saw her in her room kissing a female friend. She didn't realize that I saw them, so I just moved away slowly and quietly. I told her the next day what I saw, and she came out to me. I told her it was okay and that this wouldn't change anything in our relationship. I suggested she tell her mom, my wife. She said she would tell her one day when she is ready, but I should keep it a secret. I asked her why she didn't want to tell her, the mother, and she said that her mom is a big mouth and didn't want other people to know, especially her grandparents. There's a note here, my wife's parents are homophobic. So I just let it be and kept the secret, as it wasn't my secret to tell. Well, my wife recently found out when my daughter brought her long-term girlfriend home, who is now her fiance, to introduce her to my wife. I've known about this girl since they started dating, even met her parents. My wife got angry and asked our daughter why she kept this secret from her parents. My daughter responded by saying, I knew, so dad knew, and I, dad, was the one supporting. My wife then asked me how long I've known about this, and I told her the truth about everything. Well, I'm now being called a liar, which is true, and I understand that I lied all this time, but it wasn't my secret to tell. She accused me of living a double life and sneaking out at night to have dinner with my daughter's secret lovers. Also true, but my daughter asked me to meet her girlfriend, and they asked me to meet her parents. I even played golf with my daughter's fiance's father. This is getting juicy. Then my wife did what my daughter feared about telling her the truth. She called the whole family and some of her friends. Now me and my daughter are being called assholes for keeping such a big secret. I'm being called a horrible lying husband. I just need the opinions of internet and Hey There Parenting podcasters on the internet to know if I'm the asshole or not.
It's kind of hard because I'm looking from it from like a marriage like perspective. I would expect my spouse to tell me, right? Like it's like the whole like if you have a friend tell you something that you tell your spouse, because there's the automatic rules. Like I'm not gonna tell anyone except my husband.
Yeah, your partner. Yeah,
my partner. But then from a parenting perspective, I actually don't think the dad was an asshole, because I feel like they're building trust with their child. It's gonna hurt me. I know it's gonna hurt me. I really want my kids to be close to me, close enough to tell me all that stuff. But in reality, there's always gonna be one thing that your child's gonna be scared to tell you. There's always gonna be that one thing. Either they did something that they know that is really like broke something that they know that you really care about, or they did something that you know that is really going to hurt you.
Or they just want to keep it private.
Yeah, and that's not bad. But I actually think that the fact that that child had one parent that they really trusted to be able to say something and tell them that they had a parent supporting them, which I think is like the ultimate goal. Like the one thing that you would really want for your child, to have one parent being there supporting them, so that they don't feel alone. Because like how many times have we felt alone as adults when you're doing something and your parents are like so against it, but you have one parent like for you and like supporting you, that's really good. And so in a way, I don't think they were an asshole. They were being a great parent. It was just kind of like a stinky spouse.
Yeah, and there's no way to really have a conversation with the parent in question, which is the mother in this case, without also simultaneously outing the kid. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you say to your partner, hey, our kid has something they want to tell you, but like we want you to respond well, so they haven't told you yet. It just like, then the natural question is, well, what is it? And if they're not ready to tell, you can't even advise your partner how to be a better parent to come out to, or to share sensitive information with, without outing the child that explicitly asked you not to. I think it's quite the conundrum.
Well, it sucks is that the daughter didn't tell the parent for a reason.
Yeah.
And for that exact reason, that parent then just did it anyways.
It happened.
Yeah. So she had a reason to feel that way. She also knew her mom.
Yeah.
Like she knew her mom, or they knew their mom, right? And they were like, my mom's going to tell everyone in the family. I'm not ready to tell everyone in the family. I really despise this because I've had like parental figures do this to me. I'm the X, Y, and Z. I can do whatever I want, right? And that sucks because you get to a certain point as the child who becomes adult or whatever, you realize like just because you're a parent does not mean that you can do whatever you want. And so then I've had it where a parental figure was like, well, I'm the grandparent, so I can do whatever I want. Now that grandparent, like they were like the first person to know I was pregnant. It's like, I don't want to tell people I'm uncomfortable this time. We got pregnant really fast. It was not like it was not expected, and I'm really trying to just grasp this idea. I don't want you to say anything.
Feels like sensitive information. Yeah.
Yep. And they were just like, I'm the grandparent and I could do whatever I want. And then now they're like one of the last people to find out we're pregnant out of family members because they had that idea. And so it's like you run the risk of like when you're not respecting people, even if it's your own child, because you just think of them as your child instead of another human being, you run the risk of not being privy to certain information like that. And then you feel like you're the last to know, and you're all angry and like all like, everyone's treating me horribly. They kept this secret from me. They're lying for me. In reality, it's like you didn't build up enough trust with your child, or you weren't able to have like little moments with your child where your child felt like they could really trust you. And then now you have this situation and you want to blame your child, but in reality, you have some blame in that as well.
I think that's a child autonomy component of this story. Is it taken for granted by parents that they're entitled to a complete perfect knowledge of everything in their child's life? Especially that was like happened when she was a teenager and
young. This is like 15.
Yeah, she was 15.
A
so
minor.
She's like kind of finding her individual self instead of her just family self. And maybe that mom, part of the reason why she wasn't disclosing that information to her mom is that one, she knew she couldn't trust her mom with sensitive information. I think it said like she had a big mouth, or is at least what the other partner is saying. But that in that mix, there's also this idea that it sounds like the mom feels a bit entitled to know those things. I mean, granted, it's been years, right? I think this was years afterwards.
Yeah.
But I think that brings to our discussion of this is how entitled should parents feel to like the intimate details of their kids' lives as it relates to sexuality, as it relates to like maybe like mistakes they've made that they don't want to share.
Substance use. Yeah.
Or experimentation, like not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily just consider that a mistake, but I don't know. I would kind of put out there that I don't think parents are entitled to that level of knowledge.
In what age are they and what age aren't they? And if you're responsible for their safety, it gets a little, and your child is like not developed in their cognitive processing, their decision making, things that you as the parent, if you're healthy and in a good space, it is part of your parental obligation to help foster that sort of decision making, those sort of safe decisions. And if you're unaware, I do find and feel personally that many reasons that a child wouldn't be transparent with a parent is what they perceive as the actions and culture and beliefs of the parent towards them. And that's where the shutdown happens, is not like, oh, I just want to live my own life. I just don't want to share it. Like children naturally are inclined to be connected to their parent figure for survival. This is like a biological thing.
If parents don't find out certain things, whether or not it was purposeful or not, they can still legally be in trouble for certain things, right? And so while
if your child like hurt a building, broke in somewhere, damaged someone's property.
Did you
like,
say hurt a building?
Hurt the building's feelings by busting a window. Buildings don't like that.
You're against building harm.
I am.
Building.
Yeah, that's your platform. I'm Courtney and I'm against building harm.
I am. And but you're right. Like the parent is legally responsible. And if that child is a minor, I mean, to a certain age, honestly, we have like juvenile detention that kicks in mid getting to be an adult. But yeah, they're responsible for those kids' actions. And how do you help them learn better decision making, more rational thinking? If you're unaware, how do you learn that you're unaware? I think children are pretty honest, especially as they come into teenagehood, at telling their parents. Many teens, myself included, start to just have the language to say and be almost what feels from a parent's perspective maybe like accusatory. Like the teen may say to their parents, I didn't share that with you because you have a big mouth, because you're going to tell everyone. Or I didn't share that with you because you blow up at me and you're going to take away my car privileges. So that's why I don't tell you stuff, mom. That's why I don't say things to you, parent, caregiver, dad. That's a critical moment for the parent to either hear that or become defensive, make it the child's problem or fault still, and not actually hear what their child is saying to them. And that the child, it's a trust issue, and that they, whether it's perceived or true, the child is trying to like share some of the responsibility of why they didn't share because it doesn't feel like a safe environment to do so.
Here's the thing though, while that child may be saying it like, oh, because I don't trust you, X, Y, and Z, we also have to remember children or like teenagers or kids, that they may very well be right in like that perception of like, I can't trust you, do that. But also when they're wanting to do something, like I think of like my toddler, when they're wanting to do something, they also will find reasons not to tell or say things. So it's like that fine balance, and you can usually tell not based on the actual thing that has been done, but like knowing your child really well. Where I have like a child who has a hard time like expressing something to Drew and I. And it's like, I recognize like, okay, this is just my child. It's their personality. It's how they are. It's how like things that happened to them in the past. And I'm not talking to any particular child in particular, because all my children, even though they were all brought up for the majority of their lives in our household, they all have different personalities. Some kids are just more prone to want to share. Share some things. I have one daughter who's like very open, will tell me everything. But I don't think it's maybe just because of like who I am or who Drew is. I think they're just a child that is just like, I call that child the child who like won't lie. Even if they know they'll probably get in trouble, it's just like, whatever, I'll get in trouble, no big deal. Where I have one kid who will like
at a lot of cost.
Yes, at a lot of cost. But I have another kid who will just try to hide everything. Not that I'm saying like parents don't have a role in that, but I also feel like it's maybe something in them. I think of how vulnerable it can be telling somebody something. And even if they have like the best of best parents, that they may feel still very uncomfortable telling certain things for whatever reason. And so it's kind of hard because it can be the parent, because like that child said, it was a parent. And I think that child was right. It was a parent reason why she didn't tell, or they didn't tell their mom. But it also could be other things. It could be the topic. It could be their personality. I think all of it all together can be a reason why certain things are shared and not shared.
I think I definitely agree with you both in the sense that like it was a dilemma for, I guess, the husband. So he has this conflicting issue. There are a lot of topics running through here. Like he has this information, this sensitive information about his daughter and an obligation to protect her. And then he also has this obligation to his wife to like co-parent their child together and share sensitive information there. And so he just had to make a choice that either way he was going to lose out. And he made the choice I think I imagine myself making. But it's also like a third challenging point is that they just assumed she was straight, right? Like, I mean, she is living in a situation where it's just assumed that she'd be dating boys. And so
it made it feel like a big to-do to ever have to share that at all.
Yeah. And like, if I can be bold enough to like generalize here, like people make assumptions about who their children are. And I think that the hardest things for children to address, whether it's coming out of the closet or just realizing that you're not who your parents think you are. I think that's really hard for children's autonomy. And I think my observations of children is they withhold information because they don't want to disrupt that belief of who their parents think they are. That's what's really hard, I think. It could have been anything. This happens to just a girl being queer. But I think that that's really, really challenging. It's like my parents have a concept, and I certainly know what that is because I pick it up in their language, their expectations for me.
Yeah. What they reward,
osmotically. They just know this is who my parents think I am.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard, and there can be a lot of shame for children depending on the way parents approach that, where they're like, that isn't me. Obviously, being strategic about the information you do or don't share so that you don't maybe disrupt that understanding is natural for kids to want to do if there's not a relationship where they can disappoint their parents, where they can be kind of heterogeneous or buck expectations in their family, whether it's traditions, religion, sexuality, gender, or even like what career they want to do. Like, I don't want to, continue with the family business.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think that that's what struck me when I was thinking about this beforehand is like, this girl is different than her parents' concept for her. And she knew her mom probably couldn't handle it. And so she chose not to tell her.
And I think like you've segued into a really incredible like child autonomy. But when it comes to handling and wrapping up this Reddit story, my 2 cents, I couldn't agree more. That's how I would have handled it. But I think really what became an ethical issue from the partnership perspective is when that child came into adulthood, I absolutely think I would have shared with my child. You can share with mom, or I'm going to share with mom, but you're not a child anymore. You're out of our home. You can have this as a mature conversation. I've protected your identity for 3 years, 15 to 18. And I didn't disclose that, but I'm not comfortable continuing to build a relationship with you, your girlfriend, her parents, and have this whole world outside of mom. And you can set boundaries. You can share this with mom, and then maybe you distance yourself from us for a while. You can say, Mom, if you choose to share, here's how I will respond to that. That's a setting of a boundary, right? Your actions. But and that adult child is mature enough to be able to have that conversation. So I think where the dad or the other parent is going in a direction that maybe I would have curtailed it differently and it may have had a different outcome is just at that crux of adulthood. I think I would have had the conversation and said, hey kid, I'm going to share with mom or you can.
That's your solution. I probably would have something different. Drew and I have had conversations where if it's not something dangerous, and there's certain things that we've talked about in like the past where we're like, okay, if it has to do with this or this happens, to build trust with our child so that our child has a parent that they really can trust, because that's really our ultimate goal. I may say like, hey, X, Y, and Z has happened, or if they told me something, I'm going to wait. I can't tell you what it is. They're okay. You don't have to worry about anything, but I'm going to let our child tell you when they're ready. We've had that conversation beforehand because I remember my sister, she had secrets and my mom would literally hide it from my dad. My sister and my mom were just, it was a real relationship. It was more of like emotional, like kind of like
codependency or something.
yeah, and it was kind of like that. But I saw that and how it really caused a huge rift in my parents' marriage, that I was like, I don't want to have secrets in that way, but I also really want to have a good relationship with my kids. I still feel like they're kids of ours, that they feel more comfortable telling Drew stuff. And then we have some kids who are really comfortable telling me stuff first. And I really want them to be able to still have that relationship, but also not ruin the relationship between me and Drew either. Because that relationship that me and Drew have is really beneficial for them in a lot of ways. And if they start creating a rift, it causes a lot of ripples in not only our marriage, but in the family life, and then the relationship between me and our children. And so I figured, like Drew and I just talked about how we were just going to tell like, hey, there's something that's happening. I'm going to wait until our child is ready. I'm just going to let you know that there's something happening. And then once she's ready, then I'll be there. But I want to make sure that they have an adult. And Drew and I both have agreed that we're okay with that.
That's safer.
Yes. And that's
a
really,
high
really
level
safe.
of like trust that every party has. I think what I'm reading between the lines on this is like, he doesn't also seem to trust his wife. So he seems to agree with his daughter. And so within their marriage, there may already be a significant, like, I don't trust my wife's judgment. I don't trust her confidentiality.
Yeah. That's a lot of time.
That's
though.
a long time.
It'd be so fun. Like, it's so fun to know. But I imagine it's really fun to, like,
Have
my
a little
friends'
secret?
significant others are great to know. So she's missed out on years of time where she could be
Yeah.
hanging out with her daughter's girlfriend, you know?
Yeah.
That's
But
a
he
lot.
got to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about Courtney, your mom. Your mom loves Blake.
Loves Blake. Yeah.
Like loves Blake a lot. I imagine
it's like another child.
yeah. And so imagine that mom, she got gypped of her whole relationship, or the chance of that, because the dad just kept that secret. And I don't think the dad's an asshole. I would have done, not even probably.
It sounds like
I would have done
the
the
choice
same
you would have.
exact
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But I also feel like that dad took away opportunities for his wife to have certain
Does she,
relationships.
I think the point Blake was bringing is she deserving of those? Like, is she just inherently owed
No.
relationships with
Yeah.
their children, their partners?
Well, I think Gina's point about your meta communication with Drew about your kids, it shows me, and this is a value of mine as well, which is probably why we get along. Like, it's a privilege to know someone. It's a privilege for them to reveal anything about themselves. Yeah, our culture and society is based on making so many assumptions about people, the way they should behave, what kind of normative things kind of build their life up. But I think it extends to children too. And I guess this has to do with child autonomy. It's a privilege for your child to really show you who they are, and hard not to assume
They don't
who they
owe
are.
you that.
And I get to practice that all the time because Courtney and I are so busy, like we don't get to see your kids as often as we'd like. So sometimes it could be a really long time between us seeing them. And it's really nice to walk back in and be like, oh, it's gonna be so hard not to use their names. And I don't know all of their code names.
Code names.
But like that's happened with your oldest. Like it'll be a long time between me seeing your oldest and I'll see him again. He'll be different. And it's so beautiful and just really special. But I'm going to cry. I cry a lot. Sorry. But it's like, I can see the other side. I can see his secrecy. Like not to bust him, but last night he had to switch out. And as you came down the stairs, I watched him hide it. Like little things like that where I'm like, oh, I didn't even know he wasn't supposed to be playing that.
He knows.
But like he knows, but I just get to see him and observe him fresh every time.
Yeah.
And it really is my attitude that like it's a privilege for people to share intimacy with us and not a given. And definitely I feel the mom's pain here because she missed out on this really huge, awesome thing for her daughter for 9 years. I guess we just kind of have to be humble about like what level of intimacy we're owed, which we're not owed any.
You guys do realize that I think we've told you the same thing. Like, hey, as long as I remember we had a long walk wherever we were going.
As long as it's not safety based,
safety based or like
harm to sell for others,
that even though we may really, really want to know that information,
Yeah.
if we feel like you guys have a handle on it because we trust you guys, like you don't have to tell us. Like we haven't expected, we are kind of expect our kids will have this kind of, like you guys have known them for so long that they don't have the same fear or like being
we're not
like
their primary caregivers.
Yes. And so we kind of expect that they will have come to you guys with secrets that we've told you if they're not going to be hurt or it's not anything really, really big. And it's kind of hard because we kind of have to trust you that
how do we determine really, really big?
Because we can't even, like, our kids are kids, right?
Yeah.
So many things can happen in the future.
They've been planning a heist for years. They have the place picked out, the escape vehicle.
You're giving all their secrets.
Panda probably does. Of all of my kiddos, it's going to be him more than likely because he's got a little spark of Drew in him.
He's got like a little hacker.
Drew,
like a little
Drew has
genius.
given me plenty of times of plans. So he's like, I see the armored truck. What do you think, Jeena? And like, you guys are going to see a whole nother side of Drew, right? But it's kind of like, I really want them to have, I think people forget the power of having an adult or a parental figure or someone they really trust, that people just don't recognize how having that relationship for a child can be really life-changing. Like really change their lives, where they could be going down one road and then all of a sudden there's that one person who they feel like they can trust and help them, give them good advice, maybe help them in ways financially because they can't go to their parents for whatever reason. So many different things that it can make from their life going to point A, then all of a sudden derail to go to point C. And not say A is better than C, than B, whatever. Just so different, but like maybe even different in a good way.
Yeah, ideally.
Yeah, having you guys in our kids' lives where they can tell certain things that they may not feel comfortable with telling me and Drew right away is really important. In the same way of like how we're not entitled to know everything. We hope that our kids will want to tell us stuff. I don't feel like I expect my kids to tell me stuff. I'm hoping that they'll have an adult that I trust that they can go to and they can tell stuff and they're like, oh, this is happening to me. Do I need to do this? Yeah. I'm pregnant. What do you think?
I wanted even just a sounding board. It doesn't have to be an end disclosure. Like, I've shared something with you and I don't want it to ever go anywhere. That may come up, but it could also be, I'm not ready to address this with my parents yet. I need just someone else in my corner. Can you be present for the conversation? Can you give me ideas of how I could go about this? Can you, like, having that person? And that comes back to, I think, the idea that it takes a village to raise a child, or you should be building community for children. How do we find those other adults for our children? And are we responsible for fostering that as parents, or do we respect the decisions of our children even if they're not our favorite person that they've chosen? For example, your child really identifies with a certain babysitter or with a certain YouTuber, with a certain teacher, and maybe you don't love the model that they've chosen or the adult that they've chosen. Do you respect them to say, this is kind of who I admire and look up to, and like, this has become my trusted adult? Or do you try and like curtail them towards your preferred adults, right? You know, what does that look like? How do you build community, or do you trust your child as the older and older they get to start building their own community? And I think that's scary as an adult, to realize your child may choose role models and confidants that aren't you as parents, and who are they? And can you trust them? And you know, that's complicated. I don't know if there's a good answer to it, but
that's making me think of a broader point. We're talking about child autonomy, and almost as if it's a choice of parents. Parents are choosing how autonomous their children are.
Or not?
Children are autonomous. Like, they're autonomous beings, and increasingly
you should
so
talk
as
about
they grow up.
this is controversial.
I know.
Yeah.
Toddler.
So like, this is not some like enlightened choice we're making.
It's hard because like even Penguin is 2. We've seen his personality come out since like for the last year. So it's not like something new. That kid, he is like, I thought I was mean as a teenager. That kid has to come out as a
He's already
toddler
surpassed you.
too. And he's like, no, I don't like it. I only told you 1. Get off my bed.
I told you what?
Like, and it's like, no, you go away. Go away. Stop it.
He knows.
And it's like, he is so like, he is great at boundaries. I thought I was the queen of boundaries. He is the prince of boundaries.
Oh, it makes it so sweet because he's so sweet to us. So
he
like,
loves you guys.
seeing his interactions and then interacting with him, it's like, oh, I have this little, like, I'm in a very privileged class of people that Penguin treats a particular way.
I mean, but to the point that you're saying, I think it's worth noting, lots of kids know exactly what they want, how they feel in that moment, and they're pretty communicative about it. Specifically from like when they can start talking, going into 2 to like maybe 4-ish. Kids are that's why they're considered the terrible whatever. The what is 3s? I don't remember. Terrible
threenager.
Terrible 2's
Terrible
teenager.
2,
yeah.
teenager, and then 4 something.
Fierce 4 something terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow.
It's like these terms of I think why children get those labels is because that's in the span of child development, as the child is kind of starting to perceive am I allowed to be me? Am I like, when I know that I'm hot, cold, I don't want to wear a jacket, I didn't want to get in the bath. Like they know what they want to wear, what boots, what pants. And that assertiveness, I think, is the most challenging for a parent, because it's them being their autonomy is peak, right? And they know it. And then it's with time, yeah, that's frustrating to parent through, but with time, it can kind of go two ways. Like you as a parent can help foster, you know, healthy practices and boundaries around their needs and wants and expressed desires, and kind of try and walk that line, which is challenging. Or you kind of squash them a little bit, or you just say, you don't get a say. No, you don't get a say. Mommy and daddy and your parents tell you we wear jackets when it's cold outside. Then you don't get to come. Then you don't have iPads. Then you don't, it's just like all this pull, grab, like, no, that sort of like, you having an opinion is making my life harder, and thus I wish you had less of one, is the default. I think that's so natural to feel that way, because it's annoying and complicated to have a small person so strongly know who they are and what they want. And it's just fascinating to me that they're starting to perceive, am I safe to know who I am and what I want? Am I okay? And you as a parent trying to walk the line of, how do I keep you safe and well, but also let you know that it's okay to say, one kiss, mommy.
Yeah.
I'm done. Like that's, you know, it's complicated. Are they autonomous at 2, 3, and to what extent?
I do think it brings us back to the premise of the episode. So like we had, in preparing for this, talked about like, okay, we want to discuss child autonomy, but you know, it's not like, it's a fact. Like children are autonomous. It's just increasingly as they get older. And so it seems to me like that's a foregone conclusion. I know maybe not everyone would agree with that, or to what extent they should be allowed their autonomy, but they're autonomous beings and have kind of their own thing going on. And so like stifling that builds resentment or doesn't help foster independence later on in life. And I'm heavily influenced by my experience as a child, but like I was going to do whatever I was going to do. And either I would tell my parents about it or I wouldn't. And so I think the village metaphor you're using earlier, or talking about like our interactions in your kids' lives, it is really nice to have someone who is more on the sidelines of that, or to, I don't know, just to be able to have like kind of good grace about that, to create an environment where if it is okay for children to do something that you know maybe won't go well, but creating an environment where they can fail safely so that they can have that experience.
Yeah. Or giving your kids choices. I'm really huge where like this morning you probably heard, okay, if you don't want to wear that, then you can't go.
Yeah.
But if you do want to wear that, or if you do want to go, you have to wear this.
Yeah.
You choose whatever.
Yeah.
And I even started saying like, okay, Drew, I guess I'll stay home with Penguin, and Penguin will stay with me. And Penguin did not want to go with me. He wanted to be with Dad. And so then he made the choice himself. And was like, okay, fine, I'll put it on the like collar, button-up shirt, whatever it was. And he put it on, and it was so much easier waiting for him to make that choice.
Yeah, you empowered him to be the decision maker
so
within safe bounds.
Yes, he knows me because I'm one of the ones where he's probably learned the boundaries from me, where he knew if I told him, yes, if you want to do this, then you have to do this. But if you don't want to do that, then if this is the other choice, you choose, but you only get these two choices, right? Those are the only two choices that we have with this situation. Yeah. And he sat there, and I can tell sometimes it works. I would say 90% of the time it works. But we've had 10% of the time where he's like, I don't like either of those choices. And he just will shut down and just go like, Yeah. And that's really hard too, because you're just
what do you
like,
do then?
I just wait and I continue to tell those two choices and just wait for him.
Because there are real like constraints, right? There are like economic constraints, social constraints. Like there's like, I mean, children are so innocent, so they'd like to think that they could do exactly what they want to do.
And they don't see,
tough.
and it's not nothing. They're not doing anything wrong. They're they're making choices based on the information that they have. Right?
And that's one of the best ways, I think, to provide autonomy in developmentally appropriate ways. Is if a child doesn't have the capacity developmentally to have autonomy, provide two safe options.
What we believe childhood represents and what it should look like can sometimes just get in our way. Obviously, like you want to keep children alive and you want to keep them healthy. You want to help them be responsible.
Safe,
But then our like cultural beliefs about childhood, I think, are really challenging too.
Basically talking about how, in a way of like me being Haitian and like the way we see childhood and how we should as parents treat our children.
It's certainly different for a Haitian family's beliefs about childhood will definitely be different than just like your run-of-the-mill American family, different than, you know, a family from Indonesia.
I can tell you right now, I have no autonomy as a Haitian child. So
yeah, it was very different.
Yeah.
Caribbean child.
This conversation was not happening in the mainstream and within that culture. And maybe during your child, maybe that's changed, but generally.
I just think like in American culture, there are beliefs about childhood that I think drive a lot of the conflict in our kind of cultural and political spheres about childhood and upbringing. And that can also make it challenging for parents themselves. I mean, I don't have kids, but I can imagine, right? I think the one that we were talking the most is just like this pervasive belief that childhood is certainly like there's legal definitions like you brought up, like, you know, someone is a minor until a certain point, and there's this like tangible exit from childhood into adulthood. But I think we also characterize childhood as a time of innocence. Like, I just think these are American values for childhood, that childhood should be relatively fun, carefree, and have low to high responsibility with age. Childhood is characterized as a time of innocence, and childhood represents like this responsibility of society and parents to teach. That might look like indoctrination, that might look like coaching, or that might look like something very loosey-goosey. Obviously, I think everyone takes those like to be slightly differently, but I think those are like three main things our culture thinks really important for childhood. In American, or North American beliefs about childhood. Certainly other cultures share those, right?
That's how you would summarize.
That's how, and that's why we have all of these coming of age stories. They typically involve you get responsibilities or you lose innocence. That's like a really great way to describe a coming of age story. You're now aware that there's evil in the world, or that there are challenges, or that there are economic conditions that you're sheltered from as a child. Or it might have more to do with like there are legal ramifications for your decisions now as an adult.
Yeah, you hold consequences differently.
Yeah.
Right?
So like there is this like obviously this discrete time as a child, but then as you go through your teenage years, it gets blurry, and then you're an adult. And like I think that those represent real challenges for us. I think that's why like thinking about like the difficult conversations that people want to have, a lot of those have to do with just people's preconceived notions about what innocence is or not, and if they're threatening the innocence of their children. That might have more to do with their own prejudice.
Talking about race or talking about gender or whatever it is, like, oh, I don't want to talk to my child about that they're adopted because I'll be tainting their childhood in some way, when that is saying less about the child and their actual need or readiness to hear the information, and much more about your held beliefs about the information, that you hold some sort of fear or you hold some sort of uncertainty that this is normal, okay, natural. And I think those perceptions in how you approach your child, they pick up on that, even if you're not saying it. They pick up on if you think this is a weird thing to be talking about. They pick up on if like you're nervous to approach talking about sex, right? And they're going to know. And then they're going to feel, oh, sex is a weird thing because my parent is uncomfortable and they're making this quote unquote a hard conversation, when really like maybe what you're alluding to is culturally and in other ways, that child may have different or increased capacity around some of these topics if your own perception of their innocence or of their lack or need for understanding is being imposed onto them. Like children aren't that perception. They are their own being, but how we engage is going to be filtered through that.
Yeah, I don't know if you do want to talk about that. I guess my questions for you were, did you think that those are pretty accurate representations of American values around childhood?
I'm trying to think, because I feel like the way, I talk about how like in Caribbean culture, like we have no autonomy, where it's like you do what your parents say. But then as well as I think about the reason why it's like that, and it was like basically because of survival, right? We like, if you think of like Haitian culture, like it was colonized, and a lot of like Haitian people like were slaves, and so then they were doing things just to survive. And so when a lot of the reasons why they're like, do this, don't do this, do it like this, you have to do as I say, was in a way to protect their child so their child would be alive, so that they didn't have to lose their child, or they didn't have to go through the grief of losing a child, right? And so then in a way it was kind of just like do as I say. And then it became, once, I mean, obviously it's not like that today, but it's things that have been generation from generation. People are just like continually do as I say, you have to do it this way. Even things that I brought up or things that I do with my own kids, right? I love to have them always like really well dressed, right? Because I was brought up, if you're not well dressed, especially being as a
People
Black
treat you
person,
different.
people treat you differently, and you don't want to be treated as someone who's just going into the hospital. Or even me, like I just remembered I looked like a hot mess going to urgent care yesterday for my foot. And the first thing I was like, oh man, like they're gonna think I'm just in here. And they didn't even ask me if I needed drugs, like because I was like, oh, I'm in pain, but it's not that bad. And they're like, do you need anything more? I was like, no, I'm good. Because I didn't want to look like that person who was just like seeking out stuff. And so like American culture, I feel like, yes, kind of like a whole innocence, but in a way too, I feel like because Americans are always, and I don't want it to be, I feel like people are going to be angry, but like we are very like us, think about
Individualistic
individualistic,
society,
like I was gonna say self-centered, but yeah, individualistic
Yeah.
is like a lot better. Because
and has
of
good
that,
research, so it's less
Yeah.
biased and more just like,
yeah.
you know, a lot of sociologists have pointed to that fact through time.
But I just feel like a lot of the reasons why like Americans will do certain things, not always because of like innocence or because they're a child, but also it's like self-serving in a way of like what's going to make it easier for me so that this child will listen to me and do as I say.
Yeah.
And so while it may be some of it, some
Compliance, yeah.
parents it might be this whole innocence like component to it, but I also feel like it's like more of like a self-serving kind of, because we're all
Yeah.
individualistic here in the US. Like it's like a way to kind of get
Or you're hinting at like another value some people might add is that they'd really value children that are obedient. Like obedience would be another value.
Respectful, obedient.
I want to be clear, like at least my perception of those things is that they're all these ideal values. Certainly, like there's so many circumstances that, like, yeah, we do want to help children have innocence and then in a developmentally like appropriate time take on real challenges in life. But like many things can take away that innocence maybe before we'd like as parents. Poverty, the
Absolutely.
need to be able to like go and work and
Discrimination,
provide,
oppression.
yeah, just like race, like sexuality and gender. All of these things can like really kind of challenge those ideals that we might have. And then we also might want to challenge the way we perceive those ideals too, like in many different ways.
It speaks to, if you're a person that's having to think, by sharing the human condition with my child and being transparent, am I taking away their childhood? Inherently, if you're even able to have that debate with yourself, how much do I share about this with my child? You're not the one most impacted, and neither is your child. Because people that are like, oh, homelessness is a thing, I don't want my child to know that. Like, that's going to make them sad. It's a complicated thing to explain. Clearly, you and your child are not homeless. That kid knows they don't have somewhere to live. That kid knows that they're different than everybody else. That kid, that's a daily part of their life. So a really good way to, I think, be sensitive, culturally sensitive, and like socioeconomic sensitive, whatever it is, to think through, if I'm wondering if I'm stealing my child's innocence or how I should approach this conversation, you're inherently in a position of privilege to be able to make that like gatekeeping call of innocence or not innocence. And
we say
that's
this a
like
lot
worth
when we're
thinking
talking about
about.
like racial issues, right? If like I've had the talk with my son as a 4 or 5-year-old had to have a whole like, or he already learned about how people would treat him differently because he's Black, right? And I know people are gonna get angry, like, well, your son's technically biracial. Oh yeah, technically, biologically, he's biracial,
But no one looks at him and
no
thinks
one
he's
thinks of
white.
no one says he's white. No one will ever
Yeah.
call my son white. They're going to more likely just say he is Black. And he already had to deal with certain issues as a 5-year-old, where there was a bus driver who was discriminating against him, had him sit behind him or behind her on the bus, and then would pick on him and then started riding him up. And then we found out that she was lying. All the stuff that she was saying that he was doing on the bus was not happening. And the other kids were like, hey, we were actually picking on him. And then they apologized and all that stuff. And so then it reminds me, what you're basically telling me is like, I had to have to talk with my son, like, hey, you're Black. A lot of people may treat you differently. You can't do certain things. You can't even bring a toy gun to school, even if you might be joking or playing around, because I know that, but there might be other people who will not see that or think of you. They'll just think of you in a certain way. That I had to have to talk with him at such a young age, that innocence, if there is like a way of like saying like innocence, if that was taken away from him really early. And then in a way, I'm also thinking it might be selfish, but why is it that his got to be taken away very early and then other kids not? And so if it's like affecting my kid, then we should all be taking our part of like teaching our kids so that this doesn't continually happen. Because I guess this idea of like trying to save our kids from innocence, it really doesn't really work, because eventually it's going to be taken away. If we do it in a way where we're teaching our kids in the right way, in the right setting, then isn't that what our goal should be? Not like removing or taking away our kids' innocence, but helping making sure that we're
foster conversations, helping with understanding in developmentally appropriate ways. And like no one models that. I'm not hearing conversations on a regular basis about parents asking one another, how are you having developmentally appropriate conversations about complicated topics with your children? Like there's whole camps of people that just think it's all a bunch of BS and it's made up, and you're indoctrinating your child by introducing these ideas to them. Their naive mind doesn't conceptualize race. Their naive mind doesn't. And so as an adult, if you're like facilitating conversations, you're kind of brainwashing them. Like there's this whole sect of society, especially political sect of society, that stands by that. And then there's others that really believe, no, these things are happening anyways. They're built into society, and you're not taking anything from your child. You're empowering them to think critically, to be compassionate, to think independently, right? To really evaluate the world that they live in and their place in it. And you know, that's big division we have culturally in the US, where we have a bipartisan system, is people that have different camps of thinking for sure on that.
And I think even if it's not said explicitly, like I do believe that that's a cultural belief, and maybe that stems from like Judeo-Christian values and the beliefs about like these children being these very innocent beings. But like maybe it's not a good thing. Like maybe it does motivate us to do things that are not developmentally appropriate, or maybe it is, right? Like I just in pointing out that I think that those beliefs exist in our society, it's not like an evaluation of whether they're helpful or not, but they just are things that I guess parents would probably want to think about. Like we have all of these baked in narratives about what childhood should look like. Are those what are determining our parenting choices? Or is it us just really thinking about this kid individually and not like subscribing to these kind of overarching stories?
Well, and I think whether you're consciously thinking about it or not, it's already impacting.
Yes.
So either it's impacting because it's just how you were raised and it's just how you view the world. It's not that you're not doing it. There's no omission anywhere. You're either doing it with intention or you're doing it without critical thinking. And either way, it's going to impact your parenting approach.
Yeah, well, think about like I feel like a lot of the reactionary kind of responses to kind of wider sexuality and gender in our culture. Like I think a lot, maybe like Florida's like laws in Florida are couched in this idea of like, oh, we're trying to protect children's innocence.
Children shouldn't have those conversations.
And so it can be used for things that I don't think are helpful for children, even though I think people espousing that would say that that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, children
it kind of goes back to
are
the
used
whole
as
idea
like
of
a front line.
It's more individualistic, and we're trying to use the idea of innocentism or children being innocent in a way to gain what we want them or want us.
People in power can have through time, I think, used children as pawns in political or cultural or religious gain. When it's like, oh, the children, we're thinking of the children. That's why we made this law. We're thinking of the children, like what you're saying. That's why we are approaching this.
But
this
really,
way.
it's like something they're doing for political benefit, and it's just lip service to childhood.
Because I think the reason that they're able to do that is because children. I don't know many people that don't value children's well-being on any political spectrum, any culture. I don't know anyone that's like, yeah, let the children die. Let's all let the children. And recently that maybe is a little sensitive. I think there are people that feel differently about that with current events now.
They've been not saying, like they said for Israeli people, it was like women and children. And then they said for Palestinian people, it was, they didn't call them children. They said teenagers.
Language always informs how we're going
to. It just goes back to like kind of like in a way, if it's to gain, something to gain from it, using children, like in a way, like it's like you said, a pawn, where it's like they were children, but they called them teenagers, and they did that on purpose. So I mean, the idea, I think I said earlier before, I was like trying to not put my ideas of like what I think is right or how my kids grow up to be kind of like making me a failure or not, and just having this idea of like, okay, my kids are going to be who they are. I just need to be the person as a parent to guide them and love them so much and support them, and try not to put my ideas of how they should grow up to be, because that's really, really hard. Because I, of course, want the best for my children. So, of course, I would be like, I want you to have this job, and I want you to marry, like, a person like this, and I want you to do this. Of course, I want that because I want my kids to turn out fine, so that when I'm gone, that I feel like they're okay and that they can continue, like this whole cycle of like continually like being there for their own children, right? But if I'm thinking like logically, I know that I'm not doing exactly what my parents would have wanted me to do. But I also don't feel like anyone would look at me and be like, you're doing horrible. But still, I'm not doing what my parents would have dreamt for me to do. Like, I'm pretty sure they wanted me to be a doctor, only have like 2 kids, maybe 3. I think they actually told me like 2 kids when I had just Panda and just Badger. Like, oh, like you have like the perfect amount of kids, one boy and one girl.
You've done it. Yeah.
You've done it. You don't need any more. And I was like, no, actually, like I want to have more. They were like, okay, like all right, and like this whole idea, like I definitely do not feel like my life is horrible. I feel like I have a spouse who I love. I have children who I've loved dearly. They're all happy and healthy, and like, but I know that my parents would look at my life and be like, no, we want it differently from you. So
Jeena missed the mark a little bit.
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think I've learned to kind of like change my idea of like what I think would be perfect for my kids, like the ideal life I would want for them.
The expectations piece.
Yeah, the expectation of it I've like removed and just like, okay, if they have a spouse that maybe I might not even like, but I truly just love how they're just supporting my child and that they're there for each other. I definitely would want that for like all of my children. Want them to be working in a career that they love and that brings them like a lot of happiness and a lot of fulfillment. Would want that. I'm trying to stay away from this, like, because even I think about like Badger, how I'm like, oh, she's such a STEM girly. Solely different from me. I'm not a STEM person at all. Like science, math, oh my goodness, I'm horrible at it. The idea that she wants to do it, I'm really happy, but then I still have to remember too that I keep putting this idea that she is a STEM girly that she may not want to as a teenager. And so it's like remembering all that. And so I think it's just like trying to remove expectations of what we want for our children and just realizing that we're just supposed to be there to guide and support them and love them. And then just be there for them when they need to talk to us and not, which is really hard because I keep thinking I want this for my kids. I want this. I think even Drew and I are like trying to make sure like we save money for them and like, okay, well, what if like we see our kids' strengths and weaknesses? Maybe we should like encourage them to do this, or maybe we can plan this for them so that they'll be okay.
Like
when
you're
they're
a
adults.
curator, like molding them out of clay.
And like I hear myself wanting to do this, and I so badly because I want them to be okay, right? I want them to be fine, and it's hard because even that is like putting an expectation that they won't do well, they will do well. Where it's just like no, I just need to learn to just be there and support them in whatever they do.
And I think that changes with age. Like it feels like my parents, I look to them as a good example in this. There's so many areas where parenting is so wild. And I've been, the older I've gotten, I've been increasingly able to acknowledge like the ways that my needs were met and the ways my needs weren't met and not ascribe blame to any of that. It just was. And one of the areas that I feel my parents did really well in supporting me as their child was in offering that degree of like language autonomy, but when it was about what rain boots to wear, if I was going to go outside barefoot when it's 30 degrees, like there was a more limited scope of that to my betterment. And that was their role to keep me healthy. It wasn't like we just support Courtney and just being whoever she wants to be. And even if that causes, her making choices that are like harming others, whatever, we just love our little Courtney. And like that, that wouldn't be healthy or pro-social in any way. So they kind of found this unique way of when we were young, having it be developmentally appropriate. And then with increasing age, which I can imagine was really challenging for them, every decade of my life, I've gotten increased scope of, Courtney, tell me who you are. I trust you to make good decisions. I'm curious about the type of person you are. Or if you want to share it with me, like it's cool to have you as my kid. And that feels so different to me. I have such a large sense of autonomy that they've offered me, and they have a lot of children to offer that to. And that's a really unique trait that has brought me a lot of healing, that I think a lot of people that are like, oh, don't like open all the options up for your kid, they'll get rotten, or like don't whatever. And I think if you can try and be thoughtful about developmental level and the age of your child and having it be a conversation, it can be more broad than just I let them do whatever they want or I have their whole life planned out, like those two spectrums.
Your mom's a really good example of someone who it feels like she's always trying, like she's very honest about the impossibility of the task, but she's always trying to like disentangle herself and her beliefs from what her kids do, especially now that she has mostly adult kids, just independence, and she's just excited to see who they turn out to be. I also see you guys doing that a lot too, like with your kids and just like all the latitude that it feels like you allow them. I think I don't know, it's you have a lot of personalities in your house, so maybe you have to do that to survive.
Probably, yeah.
And they're all a lot, and like all of your kids seem very strongly aware of who they are and what they want.
Yeah.
With Penguin being like the current version that's like the most sure.
I'm excited. He's going to be fun to like raise because it's going to be, I mean, each of the kiddos have been so different that
Learning curve.
yeah,
right
but with
there.
him being the baby right now,
Yeah.
and maybe the baby forever, I don't know. But like with him being the baby, it seems like the thoughts of like when people like the oldest child acts a certain way and the baby acts a certain way, he is like leaning
The
into like that.
yeah.
Like epitome, like my parents like never told me what to do. Like they were letting me do whatever. And in reality, it's like not that. We're trying to teach you some like autonomy and stuff like that, but he's taking it way too far right now. Or he's not taking it way too far, but it's just, it's challenging. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to wrap this up, I think.
Yeah. I think it's been a good conversation.
I know. It has been a really good
and
conversation.
it's ever ongoing. There's like no good answer for any of this. That's the bottom line.
Hard thing.
And so in listening, like even as we shared some of these different ideas, I always come back to like, and next week I'll feel really differently about all of these things. And now I've read this article that really informed my opinion, and like I think I would approach it differently. Or so for me, the bottom line is always that curiosity piece. It's that like open-mindedness to, I'm going to be humble enough to realize I don't ever really have a good answer, and I'm going to mess it up pretty often, but I'm open enough to acknowledge that as my child is increasingly old enough to be transparent with them. Like, hey, I had one idea and maybe that wasn't the best approach. How did that impact you? Share with me. I'm open enough to realize that maybe that was like not ideal. I was trying. I was doing the best I could. And I think that's how I approach my life. And then also in parenthood, I think that's like a very humbling, challenging approach, but then it opens up a lot more doors for like, it's always going to change and I'm always going to be learning.
I like that disclaimer. And also just adding to it, because I don't know what people know or understand about us, but like we don't have children. so much of what we're saying is like hypothetical. We
like
have been really
almost.
It's hypothetical.
It's hard
to talk about this.
We've been fortunate to be involved in a lot of children's lives really intimately through Courtney's work and time as a social worker, through your kids, through like our very large families. But like I just think kids are neat, and I tend to learn probably more from them than I think they learn from me, and
Absolutely.
I like that.
Also way cooler than adults, and there's a lot.
Kids are cool. Yeah.
There's a lot more cooler kids that I would rather hang out with than adults.
Yeah,
honest.
Yeah, and sometimes there's the beauty of it, like where you spend time with children, and there's just times where like I don't really have to think much about what I'm going to do. I'm just loving this little being. And I think that those have been some of the most profound moments in my life, where it's just like, this is a new life. This is full of possibility, clearly very autonomous, especially your children. And it's just kind of it's a joy. Yeah.
We'll see you guys next week.